Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my beautiful hot messes. My name is Mistress Lavender, and today I'm reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson. I'm on page 181. In chapter 8, The Importance of Saying No, going into chapter 9. But if you don't know who I am or what I'm reading, you might as well start the first episode. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do know where I'm at, let's begin. We're starting at But While. But while investing deeply in one person, one place, one job, one activity might deny us the breadth, this word is so weird, breadth of experience we like, pursuing a breadth of experience denies us the opportunity to experience the rewards of depth and experience. There are some experiences that you can have only when you're lived in the same place for 5 years, when you've been with the same person for over a decade, when you've been working on the same skill or craft for half of your lifetime. Now that I'm in my 30s, I can finally recognize that commitment, in its own way, offers a wealth of opportunity and experience that would otherwise never be available to me, no matter where I went or what I did. When you're pursuing a wide breadth, this word of experience that are diminishing returns to each new adventure, each new person or thing, when you've never left your home, when you never left your home country, the first country you visit inspires a massive perspective shift because you have such a narrow experience base to draw on. But when you've been to 20 countries, the first 21st adds little. And when you've been to 50 and 51st adds even less. The same goes for material possessions, money, hobbies, jobs, friends, and romantic slash sexual partners, all of the lame superficial values people choose for themselves. The older you get, the more experience you get, the less significantly each new experience affects you. The first time I drank at a party was exciting. The 100th time was fun. The 500th time felt like a normal weekend. And the 1,000th time felt boring and unimportant. Sorry, I'm just moving the camera. The big story for me personally over the past few years has been my ability to open myself up to commitment. I've chosen to reject all but the very best people and experiences and values in my life. I shut down all my business projects and to decided to focus on writing full time. Since then, my website has become more popular than I ever imagined. I've committed to one person for the long haul, and to my surprise, have found this more rewarding than any of the flings, thrice, what is that word? TRYSTS, and one night stands I had in the past. I've committed to a single geographic location and doubled down on a handful of my significant, genuine, healthy friendships. And what I discovered is something entirely counterintuitive, that there is freedom and liberation in commitment. I found increased opportunity and upside in rejecting alternatives and distractions in favor of what I've chosen to let really truly matter to me. Commitment gives you freedom because you're no longer distracted by the unimportant and frivolous. Commitment gives you freedom because it hones your attention and focus, directing them towards what is most effective at making you healthy and happy. Commitment makes decision making easier and removes any fear of missing out, knowing that you already have knowing that what you already have is good enough. Why would you ever stress about chasing more again? Commitment allows you to focus intently on a few highly important goals and achieve a greater degree of success than you otherwise would. In this way, the rejection of alternatives liberates us. Rejection of what does not align with our most important values, with our chosen metrics. Rejection of the constant pursuit of breadth, this word without depth. Yes, breadth width of experience is likely necessary and desirable when you're young. After all, you have to get out there and discover what seems worth investing yourself in. But depth is where the gold is buried. And you have to stay committed to something and go deep to dig it up. That's true in relationships, in a career, in building a great lifestyle, and everything. Now I'm in chapter 9, and then you D word. Seek the truth for yourself, and I will meet you there. That was the last thing Josh ever said to me. He said it ironically, attempting to sound deep while simultaneously making fun of people who attempt to sound deep. He was drunk and high, and he was a good friend. The most transformational moment of my life occurred when I was 19 years old. My friend Josh had taken me to a party on a lake just north of Dallas, Texas. There were condos on a hill, and below the hill was a pool. And below the pool was a cliff overlooking the lake. It was a small cliff, maybe 30 feet high, currently high enough to give you a second thought about jumping, but low enough that the right combination of alcohol and peer pressure, that second thought could easily vanish. Shortly after arriving at the party, Josh and I sat in a pool together, drinking beers and talking as young angsty males do. We talked about drinking and bands and girls and all the cool stuff Josh had done this summer since dropping out of music school. We talked about playing in a band together and moving to New York City, an impossible dream at the time. We were just kids. Is it okay to jump off that? I asked after a while nodding towards the cliff over the lake. Yeah, Josh said. People do it all the time here. Are you gonna do it? He shrugged. Maybe, we'll see. Later in the evening, Josh and I got separated. I had become distracted by a pretty Asian girl who liked video games, which to me as a teenage nerd was akin to winning the lottery. She had no interest in me, but she was friendly and happy to let me talk. So I talked. After a few beers, I gathered enough courage to ask her to go up to the house with me to get some food. She said sure. As we walked up the hill, we bumped into Josh coming down. I asked him if he wanted food, but he declined. I asked him where I could find him later on. He smiled and said, "Seek the future for yourself, and I will meet you there." I nodded and made a serious face. "Okay, I'll see you there," I replied, as if everyone knew exactly where the truth was and how to get it. Josh laughed and walked down the hill towards the cliff. I laughed and continued up the hill towards the house. I don't remember how long I was inside. I just remember that the girl and I came in again. Everyone was gone and there were sirens. The pool was empty. People were running down the hill toward the shoreline below the cliff. There were others already down by the water. I could make out a couple guys swimming around. It was dark and hard to see. The music droned on, but nobody listened. Still, not putting two and two together, I hurried down the shoreline, gnawing on my sandwich, curious as to what everyone was looking at. Halfway down, the pretty Asian girl said to me, "I think something terrible has happened." When I got to the bottom of the hill, I asked someone where Josh was. No one looked at me or acknowledged me. Everyone stared at the water. I asked again, and a girl started crying uncontrollably. Then, that's when I put two and two together. It took scuba divers 3 hours to find Josh's body at the bottom of the lake. The autopsy would later say that his leg had cramped up to dehydration from the alcohol, as well as the impact of the jump from the cliff. It was dark out when he went in. The water layered on the night, black on black. No one could see where his screams for help were coming from, just the splashes, just the sounds. His parents later told me that he was a terrible swimmer. I had no idea. It took me 12 hours to let myself cry. I was in my car driving back home to Austin the next morning. I called my dad and told him that I was still near Dallas and that I was going to miss work. I'd be working for him this summer. He asked, "Why? What happened? Is everything all right?" And that's when it all came out: the waterworks, the wails, and the screams and the snot. I pulled the car over to the side of the car and clutched the phone and cried the way a little boy cried to his father. I went in a deep depression that summer. I thought I'd been depressed before, but this is a whole new level of meaningless sadness so deep that it physically hurt. People would come by and try to cheer me up, and I would sit there and hear them say all the right things and do all the right things, and I would tell them thank you and how nice it was for them to come over. And I would fake a smile and lie and say that it was getting better, but underneath, I just felt nothing. I dreamed about Josh for a few months after that. Dreams where he and I had full blown conversations about life and D, and well as about random pointless things. Up until up until that point in my life, I had been a pretty typical middle class stoner kid, lazy, irresponsible, socially anxious, and deeply insecure. Josh, in many ways, had been a person I looked up to. He was older, more confident, more experienced, and more accepting of and open to the world around him. In one of my last dreams of Josh, I was sitting in a jacuzzi with him. Yeah, I know, weird. And I said something like, I'm really sorry that you did." He laughed. I don't remember exactly what his words were, but he said something like, "Why do you care if I'm D?" when you're so afraid to live. I woke up crying. It was sitting on my mom's couch that summer, staring into the so-called abyss, seeing the endless and incomprehensible nothingness where Josh friendship used to be. When I came to the starting realization that if there really is, if there, what in the world, breathe. When I came to the starting realization that if there really is no reason to do anything, then there is also no reason to not do anything. That in the face of the inevitable of D, there is no reason to ever give in to one's fear or embarrassment or shame, since it's all just a bunch of nothing, anyways. And that by spending the majority of my short life avoiding what was painful and uncomfortable, I had essentially been avoiding being alive at all. That summer, I gave up the weed and the cigarettes and the video games. I gave up my silly rock star fantasies and dropped out of music school and signed up for college courses. I started going to the gym and lost a bunch of weight. I made new friends. I got a first girlfriend. For the first time in my life, I actually studied for classes, gaining me the starting realization that I could make good grades if I only gave an S. The next summer, I challenged myself to read 50 nonfiction books in 50 days and then did it. The following year, I transferred to an excellent university on the other side of the country where I excelled for the first time, both academically and socially. Josh's D marks the clearest before and after point I can identify in my life. Pre tragedy, I was inhibited, unambitious, forever obsessed and confined by what I imagined the world might be thinking of me. Post tragedy, I morphed into a new person, responsible, curious, hardworking. I still had my insecurities and my baggage, as we always do, but now I gave an F about something more important than my insecurities and my baggage. And that made all the difference. Oddly, it was someone else's D that gave me permission to finally live. And perhaps the worst moment of my life was also the most transformational. D scares us, and because it scares us, we avoid thinking about it, talking about it, sometimes even acknowledging it, even when it's happening to someone close to us. Yet, in a bizarre, backwards way, D is the light by which the shadow of all of life's meaning is measured. Without D, everything would feel in, in the word, all experience arbitrary, all metrics and values suddenly zero, something beyond ourselves. Ernest Becker was a academic outcast in 1960. He got his PhD in anthropology. His doctoral research compared to unlikely and unconventional practices of Zen Buddhism, and psychoanalysis. At the time, Zen was seen as something for hippies and drug addicts, and Freudian psychoanalysis was considered a quack form of psychology left over from the Stone Age. In his first job as an assistant professor, Becker quickly fell into a crowd that denounced the practice of psychiatry as a form of fascism. They saw the practice as an unscientific form of oppression against the weak and the helpless. The problem was that Becker's boss was a psychiatrist, so it was kind of like walking into your first job and proudly comparing your boss to Hitler. As you can imagine, he was fired. So Becker took his radical ideas somewhere that they might be accepted. Berkeley, California. But this too didn't last long because it wasn't just his anti-establishment tendencies that got Becker into trouble. It was his odd teaching methods as well. He would use Shakespeare to teach psychology, psychology textbooks to teach anthropology, and anthropology data to teach sociology. He dressed up as King Lear and would do mock sword fights in class and go on long political rants that had little to do with the lesson plan. His students adored him. The other faculty loathed him. Less than a year later, he was fired again. Becker was landed at San Francisco State University, where he actually kept his job for more than a year. But when students' protests erupted over the Vietnam War, the university called in the National Guard and things got violent. When Becker sided with the students and publicly condemned the actions of the dean, again, his boss being Hitleresque and everything, he was, once again, promptly fired. Becker changed jobs 4 times in 6 years, And before he could get fired for the fifth, he got colon cancer. The, the prognosis was grim. He spent the next few years bedridden and had little hope surviving. So, Becker decided to write a book called, this book would be called D. Becker died in 1974. His book, The Denial of D, would win the Pulitzer Prize and become one of the most influential intellectual works of the 20th century, as shaking up fields of psychology and anthropology while making profound psychological claims that we are still implemented today. The Denial of D essentially makes 2 points. Humans are unique in that we're the only animals that can concept conceptualize and think about ourselves abstractly. Dogs don't sit around and worry about their career. Cats don't wonder about their past mistakes and wonder what would have happened if they'd done something differently. Monkeys don't argue over future possibilities, just as fish don't sit around wondering if other fish would like them more if they had longer fins. As humans, we're blessed with the ability to imagine ourselves in hypothetical situations, to contemplate both the past and the future, to imagine other realities or situations where things might be different. And it's because of this unique mental ability. Becker says that we all, at some point, become aware of our inevitability of our own deed, because we're able to conceptualize alternative versions of reality. We are also the only animal capable of imagining reality without ourselves in it. This realization caused what Becker calls terror, a deep existential anxiety that underlies everything we think or do. Becker's second point starts with the premise that we essentially have two selves. The first self is the physical self, the one that eats, sleeps, snores, and poops. The second self is our conceptual self, our identity, and how we see ourselves. Becker's argument is that we are all aware of some level of our physical self that we eventually do, that this D is inevitable, and that it's inevitable on some unconscious level scares the S out of us. Therefore, in order to compensate for our fear of inevitable loss of our physical self, we try to construct a consensual self that will live forever. This is why people try so hard to put their names on buildings, on statues, on spines of books. It's why we feel compelled to spend so much time giving ourselves to others, especially the children, in the hopes that our influence, our conceptual self, will last way beyond our physical self, that we will be remembered and reserved and idolized long after our physical self ceases to exist. Becker calls such efforts our immortality projects, projects that allow our conceptual self to live on way past the point of our physical D. All of human civilization, he says, is basically a result of immortality projects. The cities and governments and structures and authorities in place today were all immortality projects of men and women who came before us. They were the remnants of conceptual cells that ceased to D. Names like Jesus, Muhammad, Napoleon, and Shakespeare are just as powerful today as when those men lived, if not more. And that's the whole point. Whether it be through mastering an art form, conquering a new land, gaining riches, or simply having a large and loving family that will live on for generations, all the meaning in our life is shaped on the innate desire to never truly be. Religions, politics, sports, art, and technological innovations are the result of people's immortality projects. Becker argues that wars and revolutions and mass murder occur when one group of people's immortality projects rub up against one another's. Centuries of oppression and the bloodshed of millions have been justified as a defense of one group's immortality project against another's. But when our immortality projects fail, when that meaning is lost, when the prospect of our conceptual self outliving our physical self is no longer seen possible or likely, terror, that's horrible, depressing anxiety creeps back into our mind. Trauma can cause this, and where am I? As can shame and social ridicule. As Becker points out, mental illness. If you haven't figured it out, our immortality projects our what? If you haven't figured it out yet, our immortality projects are our values. There we go. They are the barometers of meaning and worth in our life. And when our value fails, so do we, psychologically speaking. What Becker is saying in essence is that we're all driven by fear to give way too many F's about something. because giving an F about something is the only thing that distracts us from the reality and inevitability, inevitability of our own D. And to truly not give it a single F is to achieve a quasi spiritual state of embracing the importance of one's existence. In that state, one is far less likely to get caught up in various forms of entitlement. Becker later came to a startling realization on his D-bed that people's immortality projects were actually the problem, not the solution. Then, rather than attempting to implement, often through lethal force, their conceptual self across the world, people should question their conceptual, hold on, hold on, conceptual self and become more comfortable with the reality of their own D. Becker called this the bitter antidote, and struggling with reconciliating it himself as he stared down his own demise. While D is bad, it is inevitable. Therefore, we should not avoid this realization, but rather come to terms with it as best we can. Because once we become comfortable with the fact of our own D, the root terror, the underlying anxiety motivating all of life's frivolous ambitions, we can then choose our values more freely, unrestrained by the illogical quest for immortality and freed from dangerous dogmatic views. The sunny side of D. I stepped from rock to rock, climbing steadily, leg muscles stretching and aching, in the trance like state that comes from slowly repetitive physical exertion. I'm nearly I'm nearing the top. The sky gets wide and deep. I'm alone now. My friends are far below me, taking pictures of the ocean. Finally, I climb up over a small border, and the views open up. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna because I'm messing up a lot, but finally, I come over a small border, and the view opens up. I'm gonna start there. I'm on page 194 in chapter 9, and then you blank. But yeah, I'm so grateful for you guys here with me, and I hope you're enjoying the book as I am. And let me know, are you reading it too? What else are you reading? Are you even listening to this? I don't know. But have a great day. Stay blessed. And remember not to care. Today's a great day, and I appreciate you. Bye. I'll see you next episode. In the next, yeah, yeah.